If you've never used a real camera before and everything about cameras feels a little intimidating, this video is for you. Today, I'm going to be doing an overview of this camera right here, the Canon M50. And by the end of this video, you're going to be able to get started with your camera, shooting images, taking pictures, and also recording videos. I'm also going to teach you how to put a lens on it, which is probably the scariest part for beginners. I'm going to tell you what buttons actually matter and the basic settings that you should use when you first take it out of the box. This is an exciting time, especially if you've never used a proper camera before. By the end of this video, you'll be able to pick up this camera, turn it on, and just start using it. This camera right here is a Canon M50. It is a mirrorless camera, which basically means that it's smaller and better than any cell phone camera. And it also lets you produce really awesome video and stills of your family, or if you're using it for content and social media. The biggest upgrade here is that this camera uses interchangeable lenses and a much larger sensor. A larger sensor typically means more better. You're not just buying a camera, you're buying into an entire ecosystem that you can grow into as your skills improve. And lenses really are what change how your photos and videos look. It's something that's really overlooked by beginner creators. Let's talk about the buttons that you actually need to know as a beginner. First, the power switch. Of course, that's a pretty easy and obvious one. Next is the shutter button. On most cameras, specifically this one, when you press halfway through, it usually sets the autofocus, the Servo autofocus. And when you fully press down the button, it either takes a picture or starts the recording if you have that button set to start recording. So the shutter button serves two purposes. In half press, it sets the autofocus or starts the focus, and it also starts and takes a picture or your video. It's something that a lot of beginners don't realize at first. You also have a mode dial. The mode dial typically controls how much the camera automatically does for you and also how much you want to take control of. I say that at the beginning, it's fine to start with full auto until you get the hang of the camera, but I do recommend that you go into AV mode as soon as possible. It's the easiest mode to learn, and then later on you can venture into manual mode. How to put a lens on. This part does scare a lot of people, but it's actually really simple. First, you got to make sure that the camera is off. If you happen to take the lens off while the camera is on, don't panic, just shut off the camera and start over. The first thing that you're going to want to do is remove the body cap and then the rear lens cap. On this camera, you're going to see a small white dot that lines up with another white dot that is on the lens. On some camera bodies, this lineup mechanism is like a red line, but in this one, it is a white dot. When you line up the white dot with the white dot on the camera body from the lens, you rotate it clockwise until you hear a solid click. That click means that the lens and the camera are locked into place. Make sure to give it a little tug, rotation, clockwise and counterclockwise to ensure that the lens is on properly. To take off the lens, you do the exact same thing in reverse, but there is a release button on the side of the camera that you must hold down as you rotate counterclockwise. One quick tip here is to make sure that when you take off the lens cap off of the camera, that you leave the camera pointing downwards so that dust doesn't fall from the sky or the air and gets onto the sensor, because dust on your sensor is very, very bad. When you first get this camera, I recommend keeping things as simple as possible because you don't really want to overwhelm yourself with a bunch of different technical aspects of the camera. Set the mode dial to automatic. This is going to be probably the easiest way to get you started. This lets the camera handle all exposure settings while you focus on framing and learning as much as you can. A lot of cameras have face detection. This one also does have face detection, so make sure that it's turned on. So the camera locks onto people automatically. Leave your image quality set to RAW for now. RAW photos give you the most data so that you can edit the photos in Lightroom or whatever editing software you like. There are three things that control how bright your image is. Shutter speed controls your motion blur. Aperture controls how blurry the background is. And ISO or ISO controls the brightness of your image. In manual mode, you have to set these settings independently in real time, which can sometimes be overwhelming, especially if you don't know how your surroundings affect each setting. This is why I recommend most people start with auto and then getting into AV mode as they start learning what these settings actually do. AV mode lets you control the aperture and the camera sets the shutter and ISO mode for you. TV mode is similar, but it lets you control the shutter speed and the camera handles the ISO and aperture. Use TV mode if you want to make an image with light, long exposure light trails and waterfalls with running water. Don't worry, you don't need to master all of these things today. Like I said, start with automatic mode and then venture into AV mode. Just understand that these three things work together. I set up this little scene with the crystal so that you can see how the image changes with each different focal length. A smaller number like 16 millimeter means that the field of view is really wide, and a bigger number like 56 millimeters means that the image is really punched in. A wider lens shows more of the environment and the surrounding of the frame. And a standard looks a little bit more natural, like a 30 millimeter, typically something like what the human eye sees. A much longer lens, like a 56 and an 85, really brings the background forward and it gives you a super punched in look. It also compresses the scene. Typically for portraits of people, you want to be at about 35 millimeters to 85 millimeters roughly. If you want a group photo of 4 or more people, make sure to use something wider like a 14 or a 16 millimeter lens. Now let's talk about aperture. With a wide aperture, meaning that you have a small number like f1.4, the background gets super soft and blurry. Typically, this is a more desired look for most people. They want that bokeh and that bokeh-licious kind of look. As I stop the lens down to a higher number like f16, more of the image comes into focus. But if you notice that the settings change, that's because the camera is compensating for the smaller aperture. It also controls how much light gets into the sensor. So if there's less light coming in because the aperture is smaller from the bigger number, that means that the ISO and the shutter speed need to change. A few quick mistakes to avoid. I'm serious, don't rush into manual mode before you think you're ready. One of the things that I really see people struggling with is that they really jump into manual mode because they heard somewhere that you got to get started with manual mode. And I don't think that that's the best thing for most people to do, because you're going to struggle a lot just from trying to learn everything all at once. Like I said in this video a couple of times already, start with AV mode because that'll let you control just one aspect of the exposure triangle, which encompasses 3 different things: the ISO, the shutter speed, and the aperture. So if you start with the AV mode, you control the aperture manually yourself, and you let the camera handle the shutter speed and the ISO. So if you're looking and doing like photographs of say your family or your daughter or your children just running around, you want to be between like f1.8 and f2.8. That'll really isolate the portrait of the person that you're taking a picture of and really do a nice job of making the background nice and blurry. Now, if you want to capture, say, your kid's soccer game or their sporting event, and you want to capture a lot of motion blur, then switch your camera over to TV mode and slow down the shutter and just have a little bit of fun with it, taking some test shots. Because remember, photography, you're supposed to be having fun, right? So don't be afraid to experiment with these settings. And if you're just doing this as a hobby, take as many photos as you can. Remember, again, you're supposed to be having fun when you're doing this. Another mistake that people do is that they start buying equipment and gear that they really don't need. Don't buy expensive lenses too early. If you have any lens questions, feel free to ask me down in the comments down below. You got to remember that every single lens has a very specific use case. If your photos are not very good at the beginning, it's likely because you don't have enough light in your scene. Good photos always require proper lighting, and lighting a scene properly, especially natural lighting and recognizing proper lighting conditions, take a long time to master. Who is this camera for? This camera, the Canon M50 and other cameras like it, are perfect for beginners. They're perfect for people that just want to take photos around the house. They're perfect for content creators that are trying to level up their content and don't want to use a cell phone anymore. It's for anyone really that wants to learn more about photography and video. If you want something that grows with you, these kind of cameras around $500, $700 is a really great place to start. If this video helped you understand cameras just a little bit more and you made it this far into the video, consider subscribing. As I said, lighting is a big part of photography, and if you want to learn a little bit more about my favorite lights and some of the gear that I use, you're going to want to check out this video right here. Adios.